Welcome back to our COMET-Farm training, where I'm demonstrating how to create a new project using the hypothetical Chico State carbon farm plan for reference. We're now moving on to scenario management. Just as a reminder, if you have not completed the other videos, please go back and proceed with those before starting this video. So now that we've made sure all of our baseline management is complete, I'm going to scroll all the way to the bottom and hit Next. While I do have the option to continue on to animal agriculture, what I'm going to do is hit Add Scenario, despite this being an optional. Now I'm going to hit Create New Scenario. This is where you're given the option to name your scenario. In this case, I'm going to call this Add Cover Crop. Now, this is another huge opportunity for a shortcut. Highly recommend, if you are only changing one or two aspects of your management, for example, adjusting your tillage, your fertilizer rates, things like adding a cover crop, I highly recommend copying your baseline over and then editing that baseline versus having to recreate your entire management from scratch. So in this case, I am going to go ahead and hit Copy from Baseline. When I hit Create New Scenario, that baseline will be copied over. It'll take just a minute to create that new scenario. And then I can go ahead and select which field I'd like to begin editing. So I'm going to start with my orchard crop. And when I scroll down, you'll see that it is in fact just an exact copy of my baseline. But as the name of the scenario suggests, I'm going to be adding a cover crop. In this case, I'll go ahead and select clover. As always, we know that a planting date is required, so I'll go ahead and select my planting date for clover, which I'll put at February 1st. I'm not going to have a harvest event added. Under tillage, I want to make sure that my clover is being intensively tilled pre-planting, but that's it in terms of management. Now, of course, that's only been added to the first year in my future scenario, so I need to use the Copy Years Management feature to apply that to my entire baseline, hit Save and Copy. And now you'll see that I now have a cover crop in my orchard field. So I have clover added along with my English walnuts. Now I'm going to go over to my crop system and add a cover crop here as well. You can see that I already have winter wheat added as a cover crop for my corn, but I want to add an additional cover crop into this system. So what I'm going to do is go to my first year of management. I'm going to add a second crop here, and I'll select, we'll do annual rye legume. As always, I need to enter a planting date. I have my existing growing season for my alfalfa, so I need to make sure that my planting date falls outside that boundary. So I'll put it a couple days after the harvest date for that. And then I want to make sure I also am harvesting my cover crop so it's not interfering with the growth of the next year's crop. For clover, I am going to check the box for having a grain, fruit, seed, root, or tuber. I do want my cover crop to be intensively tilled, and I'll go ahead and save that. So now this is where I need to be a little careful about my copying scheme, because I only want my annual rye legume mix to be added to alfalfa years. So I have to keep track of how often those are. It looks like it's every 3 years or so. So I'm going to go ahead and make those selections, skipping 2 years at a time. So every third year I'm applying that cover crop. I'll hit Save and Copy. And we can now see that my annual rye legume mix is going to be added to the alfalfa year prior to the corn. So I don't want it on every single instance of alfalfa, but just the one that falls right before the corn. Scrolling back up to the top, the only other field I would have is pasture, which is not appropriate for adding a cover crop, so I'm going to skip that one. And now we're going to create a second scenario. This time we're going to call it cover crop and a conversion to no-till, so CC plus NT. Now this time, rather than copying the baseline over to this new scenario, I have the option to select to copy from an existing scenario that I've already created. In this case, I've already created a scenario that adds a cover crop. So I'm going to copy that over and then apply no-till to that scenario. Now that that looks like it was successfully copied over, I'm going to make sure I select what field I'm looking at. So we'll go ahead and do our crop field first. Again, it's a copy of the cover crop scenario, so you'll see my annual rye legume mix is already added. This time, while I do have the option to manually adjust my tillage from intensive to no-till, I'm instead going to use this feature called the Conservation Practice Advisor. The CPA, as we shorthand it, is populated with a subset of conservation practices that can automatically be added to your scenario for you. So in this case, I'm going to select Convert to No-Till, and this will overwrite any instance of a tillage event with a no-till event. So anytime I have full intensive till, anytime I would have had a reduced tillage event, now it is going to overwrite it so that it now has a no-till event. It is a good idea to always check to make sure the CPA worked, so I'm going to open up my corn, which I know was full intensive tilled previously, and now I see that it's been adjusted to have no-till converted there. So I'm going to close that. I also want to make sure that I apply it to all fields. So my last CPA only applied it to my crop field, so now I need to replicate this process for my orchard field. So I'm going to again open the CPA, hit Convert to No Tillage. As you may recall, the clover that is growing between the walnut trees was intensively tilled, so I'm going to open up my clover, open tillage, and now I see that it is no-till. The last field in our system was, of course, our pasture, which did not have tillage added, so we can move on to our third and final scenario, which is a reduction in our fertilizer and an addition of compost. So I'm just going to call this Fert Red plus compost. This time I'm just going to copy from my baseline because I don't want a cover crop and no-till and a fertilizer reduction. I just want the fertilizer reduction and compost. Then I'll hit Create New Scenario. As always, I want to select which field I want to start with. So we'll go ahead and start with our orchard. You scroll down, I'm going to go ahead and do this manually. So I use the pencil to edit. I go down to fertilizer, where I previously had 85 pounds per acre of element N added. I'm going to push that back down to 75. I need to make sure I do this for each instance of a fertilizer application. So that's twice here. And then I want to make sure I add compost. So I'm going to click Add Organic Amendment. I'm going to select compost or composted manure from the drop-down menu. And I'm going to go ahead and add 5 tons per acre here. And you'll see that that did update the blue bar, which adds up both fertilizer and organic amendment, and I'll go ahead and hit save. Now I want to repeat this process across all the years in my baseline, so I'm going to use this arrow to select every year, hit save and copy. So now each year in my baseline has that fertilizer reduction and addition of compost. So now I want to repeat this process for my other fields. So I'll go to my crop system, and we'll start with alfalfa. So in this case, we go down to fertilizer again. We don't have any fertilizer applied to our alfalfa, so all we're doing is hitting Add Organic Amendment. I want to select the date that it's being applied, so we're going to go to the end of October. Again, I want to do 35 tons per acre of compost, so I'm going to select that. The other values are going to be defaulted for me. And then I'll scroll down and hit save. Now again, this is just applied to my alfalfa, so I want to make sure I'm only copying to years that my alfalfa is growing. So that's skipping a year for corn, then 2 years of alfalfa, 1 year of corn, etc., all the way through my baseline. And I'll hit save and copy. And then lastly, we want to repeat this process for our corn. So I'm going to use the pencil to open up the corn management, where I currently have 563 pounds per acre of fertilizer being added. I'm going to drop that down to 535, if I can type this correctly. There we go. And then as always, I am going to also add compost. And again, I'm just going to do 35 tons per acre here. And don't forget to select the date of the application. In this case, again, we're going to go to about mid-May. And then we can go ahead and hit save. Now we want to make sure that we're copying that management to every corn year. So that's skipping 2 years of alfalfa, selecting corn, and so forth. Save and copy. Now this process is not going to be relevant to our pasture because we already have compost added, and so a fertilizer reduction plus compost would not really be applicable here. So we're just going to continue on to animal ag, which is our next video.